All right, welcome out. This is the third episode of the Side Hustle, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Vitaliy, from coming in from Florida, and really excited to share him with you. So I followed his content for quite some time on the web. He's a podcast host, owns a business, owns multiple businesses, has worked, has a background in the loan industry, but has navigated to real estate and I'm seeing a lot of the signs of somebody that's going to be massively successful. And we were talking about it before we jumped, here in the recording, but there's just traits that you can tell when somebody's really going to succeed. And it's not that they're going to become an overnight success, but they're putting in the work and the disciplines to succeed in all areas. And I see that from you, and I see that in your content. I see that in your mindset. And so really excited to have him on the show. And so we'll start off just by, getting a little bit more of your background, V, and kind of what encouraged you to start your first side business and, what eventually led to you being a full-time entrepreneur and business owner.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be on a show like this, especially, third episode. You and I were talking about just getting to know each other, as I feel like both of us are going up on that ladder of where we need to go. So it's just nice to be able to tell 10 years later that the Side Hustle podcast with millions of downloads a month, that I was there in the beginning stages. So thank you for the invitation, man. As far as my story, it's pretty simple, actually. We moved from Ukraine to the United States back in 2010. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. That was my path. That was kind of predetermined because that's what my dad was doing in Ukraine. And with that in mind, through college, I was kind of focusing on that industry. But 2 years into college, I needed to make some money to pay for my books. And I got a sales job selling whatever the heck it was. And in the week, I made enough money to essentially cover my books for the whole year. And I looked at the situation. I said, look, I'm studying economics and philosophy and history. That's great. But if I could replicate this process, what I just did, and it wasn't that much money, but nevertheless, for a sophomore college student, I said, maybe that should be the path that I go, or at least for now. So that same week, I decided to drop out of college, and I haven't seen college since then. So through the motions, I discovered what I currently do now is real estate. I'm a licensed realtor in the state of Florida. I run a small team of wonderful people with whom we do business, and a couple of other businesses on the side. But it all started with this realization that sales is something that is a vehicle through which I could accomplish my goals, and the rest is history.
I'm curious, what were you selling?
I was selling clean energy. I don't know how else to describe it. It's almost like an alternative to your electricity company. And the source of that energy comes from like a clean source or whatever that was. I don't remember. It was years ago. But it was essentially us standing in the middle of a mall or stores that they would send us to. We would set up a table, some materials, and as people walked through the door, you would just approach them, get them to the table, give them a quick pitch, and sign them up right there. So that was my intro into the sales game, and it was tough. It was scary, but ultimately, it was a good start to the overall picture that's right now.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm just trying to imagine this, man. This sounds like an interesting first job. It sounds like you said you did pretty good your first week.
I did pretty good. There were a couple of promotions. It wasn't something big, something that I could have made a career out of. It was a really nice gig for a college student. In fact, when I was applying to that job, I didn't really know the format of what was happening. I knew it was something sales related, but I think if I knew that it was going to be at a mall wearing like a polo shirt and just bothering people as they come in, I probably would not have taken it. But when I did, I just couldn't turn back. And that's what I did for a couple of months, and then slowly but surely transitioned into real estate.
So I'm assuming, V, that you were just a natural born salesman, right?
It's one of the things that I guess you discover. I mean, it was, I was training with a guy who did pretty good in our team. And I remember him going through a presentation, one of those elevator pitches with one of the people that he caught walking through the door. And I was thinking to myself, how incredibly difficult is this? How am I ever going to make money doing this? But then a month later or so, over the next couple of weeks, it just became second nature. So I guess there is something maybe genetic out of this, but I also think that as long as you put the work in, I mean, I stayed after every sales meeting overtime, practicing my pitch and my script and my presentation and my appearance. So you do have to put work in, as you know, to get better at it, but maybe it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, gotcha. So tell us what you got going on. I know you're a full-time realtor. You run a company and you're training other realtors, and but outside of that, like first of all, how do you find the time, right? And then you're so outside of that, you're married,
Yes.
and you also have a full-time. You're a podcast host yourself,
Yes.
which we're going to drop a link here in the comments below.
Thank you.
You're welcome. For all 23 viewers to go click on.
Yes. The millions of downloads.
um, and so, I know you also have a sales training business, and so I'm curious, how do you manage to balance all that?
Yeah, it's something. It's still a growing pain. I'm someone who gets overwhelmed very easily. When there's more than one thing in front of me, I get very, very, shaky sometimes. So scheduling is my best friend, really. Time blocking and making sure that I know what I'm doing at any point of the day. Thankfully, with the real estate business, it's been a couple of years now. And like I said, we do have a couple of people on board, including my wife, by the way. She works with me as well. So she handles the administrative and the support and the marketing and things like that. And then I have another person who handles the paperwork. And so we have some ways of delegating. For my real estate business, I'm really active in prospecting and lead generation. I still do it, 200 cold calls every single day, 5 to 6 days a week. That's my job. But yes, we also run a coaching company for salespeople in general. We have realtors, we have mortgage lenders that we help lead generate and how to survive and thrive in their business. And then next month, we're actually launching a digital marketing agency as well, because that's my wife's background, and so we'll be doing that. So there's no rhyme or reason behind it. We kind of find order and chaos as we go, but scheduling, time blocking, prioritizing, delegating are the keys to this.
Gotcha. No, that's really good. Yeah, I could kind of take this a couple different directions, but I want to kind of get to the root, right? Because I want people the listeners to want, whether they own something or not, whether they're in sales or not, whether they're have an entrepreneurial spirit or don't. I want them to be able to take away whatever value they can, and so um, I'm curious, what would you say is your, because you got really good work ethic and really good disciplines, and so one, where did you discover that? Where did you, was that something that was trained into you? Is that something that you've trained into yourself? And then two, what's like, how do you keep yourself? I get this question a lot. People are like, how are you so motivated all the time? Like, why are you so, bro, why are you so
Yeah.
positive? Like when the world's collapsing, why are you so positive? And, I see a lot of that in you. So I'm curious, what's your motivation?
Yeah, yeah. And it's a good place to start too, because I'm actually not that motivated. Motivation is not the driving force that I have, because I do kind of think that it's a false sense of confidence that sparks once in a while, gives you this idea that you can get going. And then it sort of, as it fades away, you begin to fade away as well as a result. So my formula is motivation as a byproduct of action, meaning I know what I need to do logically in my head. I know what I need to do in order to succeed in this industry. So for instance, to maintain a full pipeline in my real estate business, I have to make 200 cold calls every single day. Otherwise, I'm not going to be where I'm going to be. Relying on motivation to actually do it, I believe, is a huge mistake, because then your efforts are volatile. But if I know that I must get this done and I just do it out of necessity, out of the fact that it's just the process that I have to go through, I may not want to sit 5 minutes at a red light, but I have to sit 5 minutes at a red light because that's the process. That's what keeps me going. And then once I do get positive feedback out of it, whether it's scheduling a meeting or I get a listing appointment, it fuels. That's where that motivation comes from. At the end of the day, you find out that all of that was worth it. So that's the discipline and the consistency that comes as a result. To answer your question, how I developed it, also very, through growing pains as well. I mean, it took me a couple of years to understand what I needed to do, and B, that I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be consistent. I may not have done 200 calls, but as long as I did 10 that day, I can put a check mark and pat myself in the back. So I would say process over motivation, as they say, process over perfection or something like that. That's really the driving force behind all of this.
Gotcha. No, it's good, man. That's good. I think I heard I think it was in a Grant Cardone audiobook. I think Sell or Be Sold. He was talking
Love
about,
that book.
he's talking about exactly that, right? Like motivation. Well, that's external and temporary. So
Yeah.
I totally get that, man. So when you came to the States, from Ukraine, what brought your family here, and are they in any of these same industries as you, or have you kind of taken your own path?
Yeah, so actually it was family on my mom's side that brought us here. But the crazy thing about this whole exercise was that we submitted documents to be with our family here in the States from Ukraine back in 1997. And we only heard back in 2010. So as you would imagine, all this time, 13 years goes by, and my dad is working. He's got a business, being an attorney. We have a big family. We have certain things. And all of a sudden, we get an invitation that the paperwork has finally been processed 13 years later. And talk about motivation, by the way, because I do believe there are certain intrinsic motivations that come up. My parents just dropped everything. Back then in 2010, it was pretty much a good economy. Life was good in Ukraine before everything else broke out. But knowing that we would have a better life, my sister and I, they dropped all of it and took us to the US. And see my dad transition from an attorney in Ukraine to a janitor in Manhattan taking the subway is definitely something that I keep in the back of my mind as I move through with my business and the way that we do things. My dad is actually a part of my team now. He is a licensed realtor as well. He just got licensed a couple of months ago. And I'm just glad to be doing it as a family business at this point.
Man, that's 13 years to get the paperwork done.
Yeah.
That's actually the fastest I've ever heard of our government.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, they really pushed the gas pedal on that one.
No, man, what a cool thing. Yeah, it's really good. Well, very, very interesting too that your dad's now in business with you. Was he a janitor all these years until then, or what's he been doing?
Yeah, so that was a transitionary period. He eventually got into the nursing field, not as a nurse, but some position affiliated with it. And so that's where he's been for the last 7 years or so. And then he actually transitioned into some sales positions. And then ultimately his dream was to become a licensed realtor and do things with me. So a couple of months ago, finally that happened. And so now we're able to move forward.
Okay, very cool, man. What a cool thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. So tell me about the transition. You were in the mortgage industry and you transitioned into the being a real estate agent, and there had to have been, or at least my assumption would be that that transition wasn't probably you know um, seamless. I'm sure it required a lot of effort, and just tell me about what that looked like. Going from more of a traditional business or role, like a
Mhm.
job,
Yes.
into being a full-time entrepreneur?
Yes. So this may actually add a little bit of spice to the story, but I was actually a realtor before I went into mortgages. And then after mortgages, I transitioned back.
Mm,
So I was a licensed realtor from essentially 2018 in Florida. And until 2020, I worked as a real estate agent. I sold real estate. I knew what I needed to do, meaning I did my prospecting and everything else, but I didn't have the systems in place to make that business sustainable to the point where I just burnt out and got overwhelmed so much that I just said, take it from me. I don't want to do this anymore. I need to transition into something that has more stability, organization, predictability, something that I could really organize myself with. And so that's where mortgages came into play. Actually, my boss is still a guy that I refer mortgage clients to. And he's the one who gave me this idea. He said, why don't you give this a try and see where this goes? Worst case scenario, you'll have much more knowledge for your clients in real estate, knowing the mortgage industry. And that's exactly what happened. I went in, I started as a loan officer assistant. A couple of weeks later, I got my license. I think I was one of the quickest ones to get licensed in mortgages. I just really wanted it that bad. And over the course of the year, even though I really liked the way that it was set up, the team was amazing, the industry is wonderful, I couldn't just be in a place where A, I'm answering to somebody, B, I'm on somebody's clock or schedule, and C, sometimes it takes getting out of something to know that you miss it so much that you want to go back into it and do it right. And so that's when I went back into real estate. That was actually last November. And having been in mortgages for almost a year, I had zero pipeline, zero clients, really starting from scratch. And 8, 9 months later, we're almost 10 million in volume from prospecting alone, from the efforts that we put in, and a growing team as well. So there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel. But yes, it was a pretty good transition for sure.
okay, cool. So, being a professional in the industry, to the layman who, doesn't have their pulse on the markets, um, you sound encouraged about what's happening in the real estate world, to the person that just consumes media, right? And they're, they don't really know how to think through things like that. What would be your predictions just for, the next 18, 24 months in the real estate world?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first of all, I would just advise everybody to turn off the news. I think I did that a couple of years ago, once COVID started hitting, and I was like, I'm getting really depressed and nihilistic and hopeless. So I wouldn't watch any of that crap. At the end of the day, it's clickbait that gets people in the door and then keeps them there, and that's really all about what it is. At the end of the day, it really depends what market you're in, but overall, business is good, the market is good. People say, oh my gosh, the rates just went over 6%. Yeah, but in the 70s, they were itching 20%. So relax, it's still historically low. Things are doing fine. Are there going to be fluctuations in values or prices? Probably so. But I haven't seen that big of a transition or a drop. And I still encounter some agents who are panicking and, oh my gosh, where's the business going to come from? Are we going to get any listings or clients? And I just think that it comes from a lack of confidence in yourself to find business in the first place. Because whether it's a down market or an up market, somebody will always buy or sell something, whether it's technology, a house, a pair of shoes. There's no GDP of zero ever. And so I'm optimistic about it, but I'm also practically optimistic because I know as long as, here's the thing. There's only so much that one person can sell, right? There's only so much pipeline that one person can generate. And I physically can't sell 1 million houses a year, but I probably can sell 30, 40, 50. And even in a downturn market, 50 houses is nothing. And so that should probably extend to any other salesperson out there. You always have an opportunity to be successful regardless of market conditions. That's my general outlook on just everything in general.
No, I love it, man. Yeah, for sure. What are some of the most impactful books you've read in the past 12 months?
Gosh, so Atomic Habits, I'm actually rereading it right now. I read it once and I'm rereading it again, partly because I need to be reminded sometimes that it's all in the details. Progress takes time, and it's not just isolated action or isolated behavior. It is the way that your mind is programmed. So we talked about motivation or discipline. Discipline is freaking hard when you do it on day one. But as you move through the days and you contribute one half of 1% every day to the ultimate goal, it becomes sustainable and it becomes real and possible. And so that book to me is has been really transformational. If there's another one that I would recommend, Deep Work by I believe gosh, I forgot his name, but Deep Work. He the author is a I believe a professor of computer science, and he just propagates getting off social media, getting the distractions out, the noises out, and focusing on what actually matters. And so that in my business has been pretty helpful as well, because it's really easy to get distracted and be all over the place.
Gotcha. No, it's good, man. Cal Newport.
Oh, Cal Newport. There we go. There we go. Now, sales books, aside from, the Grant Cardones and Jordan Belforts of the world, I would say Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount is the single best book out there for anybody, for anything. That's the only one. If I could read one book for the rest of my life and be successful in business, it would be that one.
Wow. That's actually, I mean, I just picked that book up for the first time like 2 months ago, three
Is
months
that
ago.
right?
And man,
Yeah.
I read it and I was like everybody that's starting a career in anything, like I don't care if you're going to be a
Yes.
receptionist at a hospital, like you need to read the book.
Yes. 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 It is the single when I picked it up, and I picked it up already, I've been in the industry, but it's such a good reminder. It's almost like getting into an ice bath. Just it refreshes you and it puts your mindset in the right direction. And it's a wonderful read for anybody. Definitely recommend.
Okay, so I gotta take this rabbit trail. You mentioned getting in an ice bath being refreshing. Most people
Yes.
when they think of an ice bath, they think of that sounds horrendous. And so
Yes.
I'm curious, like, what are some of your habits that you've developed that some might consider unusual?
Well, this is a recent, because up until, just recently, work has been very, very, at the center of my life. Okay. So, the number one culture shock that I experienced in my life was getting married, but a culture shock in a good way, because now we're building new habits together and trying to have life together and so on. But as far as me personally, I started training back. I have a background in martial arts, but
Okay.
I've skipped it for a while, and so I'm back into it as of a couple of months ago. I started doing jujitsu, and I started it, and it kind of like started to consume a big portion of my day, which I love so much. Fitness became a very important part of my life, eating the right foods. And again, it's recent. I'm still building discipline and endurance through it, but it's a habit that I'm very proud of. Spending 4 hours at the gym every single day, in addition to running all these things, is pretty cool to me.
So how long have you been married?
I've been married a year.
No
Don't
way.
tell my wife when I say it feels a little longer, but all in a good way.
What was the today's the September 23rd. What was
Yes.
your wedding date?
So we actually did it in a very non-traditional way, right? We're still planning our wedding, actually. We never had a wedding. We got married in a courthouse, but we're planning the actual ceremony. So, we're still kind of in that process. It just, we got married very quickly. We got married about 2 weeks into a relationship, which is crazy, right? But we did. And it's been amazing since then. And so now we're just planning the logistics of everything else that needs to be in place. So definitely, Dalton, you're definitely invited when it happens.
Bro, man, so it took me 8 months to propose to my wife.
Yeah,
And you're married in 2 weeks. Tell me,
2 weeks.
tell me about that.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, to me, it's always been about having a family. I never wanted to be in a position where I'm just, uncertainty everywhere in relationships or whatever else. I didn't want to be in and out kind of person. And so when I felt that this woman is someone that I could spend my life with, and there's been very deep and very, just very incredible conversations and so on and so forth, it could not have been a coincidence. And so just gut feeling, God, whatever you want to call it, that was the decision. And plus, being in sales, you kind of know time is of the essence, and contract has to be signed, and there's no, the urgency, sense of urgency. So that's what we did.
So you run a really short sales cycle, it sounds like.
Exactly, exactly. I prospected very aggressively, followed up relentlessly, and we closed the deal.
I love that. So, my wife, I met her when I was 14.
Wow.
She was 12. She cold contacted me a football game. Our schools played each other. And I knew immediately I wanted to marry her. She has letters that I wrote her when I was a kid telling her that I was going to marry her.
Wow.
But she went off and did her thing, right? And then I would did my thing, and then sure enough, our paths ended up crossing, and I was like, all right, this is my chance. I'm doing it. And
Yes.
so,
Yes. Yeah,
so I,
not a coincidence, not a chance. Definitely meant to be. That's a great story, man.
yeah, no, I love that. Well, and she's part of your team too, right?
Yes, yes, she
Right.
is the brains behind the logistics, the administrative stuff. One of the things to have a successful business, I believe, when you start scaling up, is knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're really not good at. And to me, I am very not good at paperwork and keeping track of things. And so for me, talking to people and prospecting for business could do that all day long. And I think it's a good skill to have, especially if you're running your own thing. But then there's everything else, the support, the admin, the clerical stuff. And a lot of people get used to that, and often as an excuse to not do the things that actually make them money, by the way. So when my wife came on board, that became her responsibility. And it's been incredible ever since.
No, that's awesome, man. I love that you've got like a family enterprise forming up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Very,
definitely, and it's always been important to me, because that way I can control my philosophies and my values and put it out into the world, and really have control over the way that we like to do things, not
yeah,
mandated by anyone or anything, just building our legacy and sharing it with everybody else.
gotcha. I want to touch on just the spirit of the entrepreneur. Because a couple things you said have kind of alluded to it, but I want to encapsulate it with, maybe just some of your thoughts. What do you think for just the regular Joe? Grew up in suburbia, and parents both worked in corporate, and they hear somebody and they follow somebody like you, right? Who's obviously successful and obviously has discipline and mindset and is a hard worker and free spirit and all these things. And maybe they want that, but they don't necessarily, there's a lot there. The odds are not in their favor, but they want it. I'm curious, like, what would you say, V, is someone who's, someone who's made it and who's, succeeding? What would you recommend for that person to do to cultivate the spirit which you have?
Yeah. So I would say that number one, expectations, hard expectations need to be set in place, that even though anything is possible and you're able to achieve and accomplish, it's going to take time. And it's going to take a lot of time. Meaning, if you decided that entrepreneurship or business or sales is something you want to do, and you've made that decision today and you've committed to it, if something is not going your way a week later or a month later, and I'm sorry to say, sometimes a couple of years later, it's not a reflection of the fact that it's just not going well, or you've made the bad decision or whatever else. it's a reflection of the fact that it takes a lot of time and a lot of pain and a lot of effort. Still to this day, I'm not in a position where I could just kick my feet back and be completely free from worry or anxiety when it comes to finances or financial decisions or whatever else. Yes, there are tough periods, but I just know that as long as I put my head down and do the work, it's inevitable what comes out on the other side. There's a saying that my wife and I often go back to is, we know how this ends. For instance, when we fight, we just say, we know how this ends. This is just the process. It's a growing pain, but we know how this ends. Same thing in business. Something is not going right, or you're not seeing the income or the results. You know how this ends as long as you put the work in. So that's the number one realization, because I don't want to give a false sense of hope that things just turn around day one. And number two, I would say finding someone, people say find a mentor and, have them lead your life or whatever else. But at the end of the day, successful people don't just look for an average Joe out in the street and say, I'm going to change your life, Joe, come on board with me. But I do mean finding an environment where you can develop the skills, and whether you stay in that environment or transition onto something else is really irrelevant, but really finding that environment where you can grow in your skill set and whatever you want to do. And you're welcome to test it out. You don't have to get it on the first try, right? You maybe thought you wanted to do sales, but then you worked in sales for a couple of years and ended up being horrible for you. So maybe marketing or design or something else is a better calling. But I would say start testing environments and put yourself in a position where you can develop those skill sets and ultimately move forward. Because I'll tell you this, sales is also different, right? You can be really good at, I don't know, real estate sales, but maybe something is not clicking for you selling software, to CFOs or something like that. So have the patience and the courage to try things out, but always put yourself out there and keep on pushing.
When you think about your success long term, right? Uh, I'm assuming you're kind of ambitious, maybe you want to be successful. How do you define success long term, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I define success long term of having just the freedom and the ability to do what I want. That's number one. And number two, to share that freedom with other people, whatever it is. Like, for instance, I really do want to have so many resources that I am able to help an average Joe or help a group of people or whatever else. So really just growth in your resources, whether it's money or whatever else, to the point where you no longer have to worry about the logistics or the day-to-day, as I'm doing now. Every day I look at my pipeline, I'm like, I got to get more. Even today, I'm trading my time in for dollars every single time. And it's annoying. I know what I'm doing it for, but that's ultimately not where I want to stay. And so just being free from that, doing whatever I want when I want it, having my family do the same, and then also having enough resources and abilities to then pass it on to people who need it at that point more than me.
No, that's good, man. Yeah, you can tell. It's easy to tell when somebody's heart's in the right place, and um, you know, what I'm hearing is that success for you isn't self-serving. But to save a drowning person, you can't be a drowning person, right? You have to be afloat. And so, I just admire
Right.
that about you. How old are you, V?
25.
Bro, I just admire the hustle, 25, and the heart behind it. I
No,
really do.
I appreciate it. The reason why we even started, for instance, the coaching company, and that's to answer also one of your other questions, is, the side hustles and how do you identify and how do you start? It's not something that we planned either. I just started doing pretty good, not the best, but I just started doing pretty good. And people who either follow me on social media or whatever else started reaching out for advice. And I gave that advice freely without any expectations. sat down with agents, gave them the entire outlook of the way that I'm doing things, because I do believe that business is abundant and we're all better in this together. It helps the industry overall. If there are better realtors out there, it helps me as well, because now the outlook on the industry, on its participants, everybody involved, improves as well. But we just started getting so many inquiries to the point where, it is a business at the end of the day. We do need to put value on time. And so that's when we kicked off the program, because, to filter people who are actually motivated, who are actually willing to put the work in, and so on. But it all started from just private conversations, hours on end, with competitors, quote unquote. I don't believe really in competition, but in the modern sense of the word, with competitors, just telling them the secrets, quote unquote, and kind of transitioning from there. So it's really all about service, whether it's your customers or your colleagues. I believe that should really be at the center of anybody's path.
Who's your favorite, maybe celebrity salesman or just maybe thought leader? Who are like your go-tos?
Yeah. I would say, I've really been obsessed with Jordan Peterson a lot.
Really?
And yeah, Jordan Peterson. And, it's not necessarily, just sales or whatever else. I believe sales is a skill, but that skill is not a reflection of character, right? I believe that if you really want to make yourself sustainable over time, make your business sustainable over time, you really have to base it on principles and values and a character that develops in the right direction. So I just love him so much because the depth with which he goes into every subject or individual, whether you agree with him or not, has really helped to kind of awaken that sense of accountability, self-reflection, and so on. And so I believe that it just makes me better as a person. And then as a result, I'm having energy now to put into my sales or business development or my relationships or so on. So I definitely would consider him a big part of my growth. But yes, of course, there's others as well.
So very interesting. So a little bit backstory on Jordan. So he got famous during the whole he was standing up against all the gender pronouns that Canada was requiring universities to honor.
Yep.
And about the same time, I'm in college and I'm just a party animal and I don't have any direction, no sense of purpose. And my dad, he's at this point, he's fighting terminal cancer, and so he's
Mm,
got like not long to live, right? And
mm,
he wasn't getting through to me, but Jordan was speaking truth from an academic's podium, and
mm.
I'm caught up in academia. So my dad starts sending me these Jordan Peterson videos, and he starts
Wow.
planting these little seeds of truth in me. And it's interesting. He ended up. My dad passed, but he and I love him, and I'll never be able to repay him for what he did. But those little seeds of truth, man, he planted with Jordan Peterson actually led to a long,
Hmm.
just a love for Jordan's work. And a couple months back, I actually got to go meet him. He was
No
coming
way.
through. He was in Tennessee. He did this tour, and sure
Wow.
enough, I drove up and got a seat in a show, and he was speaking on the chapters of the 12 rules. He just picked a rule, and he talked about that rule as his show. Man, there we are.
This was not planned.
He talked about chapter 6, which is just commit yourself to one thing and give it everything you've got and just see what
Yes.
happens.
Yes.
And so, I'm curious, do you like that book better, or do you like his the sequel better?
So I haven't read the sequel. It's definitely on my list. I have a big list, and I'm not a big reader because I just get lost in the day to day. But I did read the 12 rules, and that rule spoke to me the most because in the beginning I told you how I get overwhelmed when there's so much on my plate. And the best way that I found how to get back on track is just to narrow it down to the one thing that I need to be doing in this moment.
Mm.
But ultimately, as well, in career also, people who are looking to transition to the next stage, but they don't know where to start. Stop jumping around, pick the one thing and work on it and see what happens. And Yeah, I love that. And Jordan Peterson, I mean, overall, he's a great thought leader. I love his series on biblical studies. That's incredible to me. um, it's just one of those things where I feel like you have to dive into that sort of content to understand the full impact. And That's the way that my experience has been.
Man, when I asked that question, I was expecting Grant Cardone or Tony Robbins or man,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's
I
good.
would say, I mean, if we're going that way, yes, Grant Cardone is, I call this on the surface, because at the end of the day, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but anytime you pick up a sales book or a self-help book, right, or some motivational book, very rarely do you discover something new,
Mm.
right? It reiterates or it puts things in a perspective for you, maybe makes new connections to the point where it clicks, but you never go, my gosh, I never knew prospecting was the key to getting more clients. Or I never knew, positive affirmations would be a good idea. Those things for the most part are surface level to me. It's the way that you develop the overall skill of sales, if we're talking about that. But like I said, I feel like people ought to seek to discover themselves in the best way possible. And there's a different audience of authors and speakers and thought leaders that is associated with.
That's good, man. I'm in agreement with you. I'm always reading some sort of sales or personal development or self help, but a lot of times it is just kind of beating, the same principles into my mind and reminding myself.
Yeah.
And then I like to also keep, a pulse on someone that's going in more depth, to encourage me to think differently. And so,
Yes.
no, that's good, man. Good insight. V, I know we're coming up on our time here. And so, man, you've got so much you could share. I know I could ask you questions all night, right? And I'm growing and learning. I'm just very grateful for you. And what I would like to do is just kind of, leave it, just leave you with a minute or two just to share some thoughts for the listener and the listeners. Just, I don't know necessarily who it could be, but just around the topic of the side hustle, right? The person that's either got a business or want to start a business or has something. And the purpose of the podcast really is just to promote that spirit of enterprise and that spirit of entrepreneurship. And
Mm.
so if you could just speak to that, man, about through your own experience to encourage the listener, I'd like to end with that, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would say I would give a couple of principles that I think that I have come across that have been important in my mind. My wife and I just talked about this, how everything that we say or do is a result of our mindset, but mostly the framework of our mind. Meaning, how do we process the world? What categories, what algorithms do we set for ourselves in order to function? And so when somebody goes through or starts a new business or goes through a difficult time, I think it's important to understand some principles in order for that journey to be worthwhile, in order to not give up and to keep going and so on. And I would say the number one thing is progress over perfection. Uh, don't dwell in all these little details on how exactly to get started, exactly what to do. Do I have the resources to do this? Do I have enough knowledge, or do I have that microphone to start the podcast? Um, it doesn't, it's not, it just doesn't work that way. What you have to do is get started, fail forward, and consistently just replicating those failures to the point where now you just get better 1% every single time. So that's the number one thing I would say. Number two is there is no secret to anything. All these books, the secret to make $1 billion or the secret to be successful. Wouldn't you think the authors who wrote those books why would they even write the books and make money out of it if they knew the secret of 7 steps to make $1 billion? It's all a scam to me. You know, maybe not a scam, maybe they have good intentions, but at the end of the day, that one book that you just bought for $20 that claims in 7 steps you're going to make $1 billion in a week doesn't exist. The formula that I found for any type of progress is this: hard work plus patience plus consistency. That's it. That's it. There's no magic pill. There's no secret formula. There's no book. There's no crypto thing you need to invest your $100 into to get $1 million tomorrow. It all boils down to processes. And number 3, Alex Hormozi. I don't know if you've seen him on LinkedIn. He's everywhere now. One of the things that spoke to me from one of his podcasts was everybody dreams and everybody has goals. The fact that you have goals doesn't set you apart from no one. You are always going to be in this group of people lumped together who always dream and always have goals and they desire something. But what really sets you apart is your execution, which obviously ties into consistency and say no to perfection and just progress over time. But having a goal is one thing, but also executing daily and consistently without fail, having that discipline is really what's going to set you apart. So I would say if you took one thing out of this was get to work and don't stop until you're done. You know how, what's his name? Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins.
Right.
You know, he said, I don't stop when I'm he just said, I stop when I'm done. You know, not when I feel like it, but I stop when I'm done. Regardless how you feel, just go through the motions. And on the other side, success is inevitable. It just takes a little bit, but it's there.
Man, I love it. I love it too, because if I'd said the exact same thing, because I don't have your accent, it would have sounded half as good.
I'm actually jealous of the Southern accent. My wife is from Indiana, so sometimes like I kind of hear that a little bit, and I was like, I wish I spoke like that.
Well, V, it's been good chatting with you, man, and I appreciate you taking the time and jumping on here with me. And with that, we'll wrap it up. This is going to be the 3rd episode of The Side Hustle.